When it comes to retro gaming, one of the terms that you see getting thrown around a lot is nostalgia. Shouldn't come as much of a surprise, seeing as most of us like older games because we played those older games when we were younger. Now, I've always been pretty adamant that nostalgia isn't the only reason why we like these older games. There's plenty of good, solid, objective reasons for why we like these games, but with that being said, it's hard to deny the power of nostalgia. Nostalgia can make something that was already good even better, or it could make something that might be considered bad good instead. For example, take something like Sonic the Hedgehog 2. That's a game that I thought was good back in the day, and I still think it's good now. And with that added experience of growing up playing that game, it makes it even more special for me personally. Then let's take something like the original Game Boy, this sucker right here. Now, a lot of people would look at this nowadays and say, yeah, looking at this screen kind of looks like viewing into a pool of moldy water or something. It's not good. But for me, oh no, I love looking at this because it takes me right back to my childhood. So what's happening here is that an experience I have from growing up gives me an added reason to enjoy this that I wouldn't otherwise have. I have a lot of nostalgia for the Game Boy. And here's the thing about nostalgia. It's very different for each person, and it can be in more of an overall general sense, something you just sort of remember being a general thing, like, yeah, I remember the Game Boy growing up, for years and years it was a thing that I enjoyed, or it could be a very specific memory. And I want to throw some examples of those specific memories at you because they can be very personal. So let's say two different kids have separate, distinct memories of Super Mario World. The one kid has memories of getting the game for his birthday at this big birthday party that he had with him and his friends, and they're all sitting around the living room afterwards, eating pizza, passing the controller around. It's something he'll always remember. It's just burned into his brain whenever he plays or thinks about Super Mario World. And then we have the other kid, and his memory of Super Mario World is getting the game as a rental one weekend. So he's playing Super Mario World, and he's jumping and running and playing through the levels, having a great old time. He's by himself in his living room, but also his dog is there. And the catch is, his dog has really bad farts that day. So he's playing away in Super Mario World, his dog's farting away, and here's the twist. The kid has fond memories of this because even though at the time the dog farts were really horrific, he looks back on it fondly now because it makes him think about the good times with old Sparky. Even if it was farting, those were still the good times with that dog because he loved that dog. Hey, don't look at me, they're not my memories. I'm just using examples that are at such opposite ends of the spectrum in order to show you how different and unique these specific nostalgic related memories can be to each person. In a lot of instances, our nostalgic memories are tied to our childhood. Makes sense. I mean, after all, a lot of these games were current back then, so we would have been playing them when they were new. Also, a lot of us just have fond memories of our childhood. It was a happy time with not as many responsibilities for a lot of us, and there's just an inherent type of fun that goes hand in hand with it. So a big part of retro gaming for a lot of us is to try to tap into that good feeling again, because let's be honest, a lot of us will say that being an adult kind of sucks. But with that being said, nostalgic memories aren't strictly limited to your childhood. It could have been at any point in your life, really. Your teenage years, your preteen years, your life as a young adult, even your life as an adult. I mean, a lot of us have been playing older games for a while now, so you could have memories from, say, 10 years ago or so that are nostalgic for you, even though you were an adult at the time. Quick little story for you. When I really got into retro gaming was actually around about 2010, 2011-ish. There was actually a big chunk of my life where I just sort of stopped playing video games. I was focused on doing other things and I just didn't make the time for it. I sort of fell away from it. So when I got back into retro games around 2010, 2011-ish, one of the first systems that I looked at and looked into was the Sega Genesis. It's just what caught my eye. And one of the very first games that caught my eye was, yep, you probably saw this coming, Rocket Knight Adventures. At that point in time, playing games that were from the 16-bit generation were almost completely foreign to me. I had not played them since the early mid-90s, and at that point I was such a young kid that I really didn't have that good of a grasp on them. I enjoyed them, sure, but it was a completely new experience as an adult. So here's the funny thing, Rocket Knight Adventures is a game that I would actually say I have nostalgia for. Not because I played it during my childhood, heck, I didn't even know it existed back then, but because it was such a memorable time for me when I started getting into older games around 2010, 2011-ish. Rocket Knight Adventures was one of those first games I played, and it's just burned into my brain as a great time getting to rediscover these games from the past and see them in a whole new light. Also, back in the days when I would scrounge for CRTs off people's curbs, the first game I would always try out on a new CRT when I brought it home and wanted to see how it looked, plug it in, power it up, was always Rocket Knight Adventures. So the game reminds me of getting CRTs also, so it's like double the good memories. Okay, now before I wrap things up, I want to talk about something that I don't really see get mentioned very often, which is what I'll refer to as negative nostalgia. Okay, so what the heck am I talking about? Well, it's pretty simple. Basically, instead of positive memories associated with the game from your past, it would be negative memories surrounding that game. So let me throw a quick example at you to show you what I mean. Okay, so say you really liked GoldenEye as a kid on Nintendo 64, and one day you're playing it over at your friend's house, and your friend's older brother happens to be hanging around, and he starts saying how much GoldenEye really sucks because Perfect Dark is a way better game, and only a complete idiot would play GoldenEye instead of Perfect Dark. Now, maybe you would have enjoyed Perfect Dark, but because your friend's older brother was being such a jerk about it, you just lost all interest for Perfect Dark, and you forever associate that jerk brother with the game. I find a situation like that to be unfortunate because it really has nothing to do with the game itself. It's more to do with what somebody chose to do, how they chose to act, and that's the reason why you have a negative association attached to the game, not because of anything the game itself did. So what I would suggest in those circumstances is to give the game a chance and try to build your own new positive memories associated with that game. The thing with nostalgia, whether it's positive or negative, is that essentially what you have is the game in and of itself, and then almost a blank canvas around it that will be determined by the personal experiences you have with that game. What's going on in your life around that game, what type of memories you end up having with it that will end up adding extended value or meaning, whether positive or negative, to the game. Alright, and so that about does it for my thoughts. For this video's question, you can either talk about a game that you have a lot of nostalgia for, or just give your general thoughts on this subject. I would love to hear any answers you may have. So be sure to leave those comments down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah. And he's talking about video games. He's the